at it again. Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Oh, yes, it is. Views expressed are those of the speakers. They are indeed. And they do not represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own. And by our, in this instance, I mean myself, because I'm the only one here. Sorry, fixing things. Yes, okay. Here we go. All right. Sorry. Yeah. It is. Doing these shows is I hesitate to call it a lot of work because it's not really a lot of work in the traditional sense of the word work, but it's just, it can be hard to get yourself motivated to do it. I guess that's the best way I can explain it. So I motivated myself. I got here, and I am here to speak to you this evening. Monday, if you're live on the radio or streaming. Friday, if you're UPTV-ing. I believe it is Fridays. I really need to learn when UPTV plays these shows so that I can properly advertise them, because I don't actually know when it's on the air. I don't have a TV, so I don't watch TV, and I don't know when I'm on. But hopefully, I'm on at a time when you can watch. You can also catch us on YouTube. So there are lots of different ways to participate in this show. We don't do call-in type things. I don't even know if the phone system works. It used to work, and it was a convenient feature, but it has been some time since I have known for sure that it worked, and I'm not entirely sure I even remember how to do it. There's a button over here that says phone. I could press it. Let's see what happens. Nothing. Strange. I sound different to myself when it's turned on, but other than that, I don't know if anything happens. So there you have. That's the phone. It either does or doesn't work, depending on the information that I don't have. So anyway, CU Immigration. What is it about? Immigration. Our last couple of shows, we interviewed a person from the Chicago area who's a daughter of immigrants. And it was kind of an interesting discussion to sort of hear about people who are immigrants, an immigrant community that kind of doesn't really think of themselves as immigrants. They're sort of like, well, no, we're here now, we're Americans. And I think that's true of a lot of people. A lot of immigrants. And when I try to imagine myself like, okay, I'm going to picture what it's like to just pick up everything and go to another country, I would think that as soon as I sort of felt pretty comfortable finding my way around wherever I was, able to converse in the local language in a comfortable enough way that it's like when someone starts walking towards you like they're going to talk to you, you're not going, oh, no, I don't know what to do. But you can face most situations with equanimity, as they say. I think you would start to feel right about that point that you belonged. Now, the locals might not feel like you belong. They might be, oh, you're different. You're strange. You look different. You act different. You sound different. It's hard to say when other people would start feeling that way. But I feel pretty much like once you're kind of comfortable in your place, you'd feel like you belonged there. And there are a lot of immigrants that have been here for years and years and years, and yet still, for whatever reason, don't have that little bit of paperwork that says yes, you officially belong here, and so they are potentially victimized by the current administration, by the current anti-immigrant fervor that has been whipped up by some people in particular, and sort of these days Republicans generally. It's unfortunate because, all right, let me sidestep. This is an editorial aside. WRFU is a community radio station. We're licensed by the FCC, so there are lots of things that I have to kind of think about before I say, because it treads sort of uncomfortably near the guidelines of what you are supposed to talk about in this kind of setup. It's a nonprofit organization that sponsors us here, and so we're not supposed to advocate directly for candidates and take political positions and make calls to action, I think is one of the terms that it is. There are a number of things that we're not supposed to do. So I find myself in a quandary a lot of the time, because there's a very clear distinction between, at least right now, between the political parties insofar as their stance towards immigration is concerned. And certainly, beyond just the party itself and its sort of general tendency, and at this point in time and for the last few years, we have had an administration that is absolutely over-the-top anti-immigrant in all sorts of ways, in just practically every way you can think of. And not just anti-immigrant, not just we don't like immigration, we think we should cut back. It's not this intellectual question of, we don't think the economy is as good as it could be if we had less immigrants, or we don't think that our social fabric is flexible enough to allow these people to come in and stretch it in the ways that they do, or whatever it is. I mean, it's not that kind of situation where you can have sort of reasoned arguments and you can say, well, that is a way of looking at the situation. I see it differently. It's nothing at all like that. It is a conscious attempt to lie and to create anti-immigrant fervor for political purposes. We've talked about this before. Sorry, I wish I could read and look at the camera at the same time, or do this and look at the camera, because I know it must be strange for me to be talking like this and having you see me from over here. But it's just because of the setup, there's no way to do that. So I apologize. But anyway, the current administration is trying to stigmatize immigration generally, pathologize, criminalize immigrants specifically. And they do it in several different ways, and some of what I'm going to be reading here will get at that. But generally speaking, there is a clear attempt being made, and one that is fairly successful amongst a large group of people, to separate immigrants from us, to define us as being some strange, I don't even know. It's like they don't, how can I put this? They don't bother to get too specific about a lot of things, because there isn't really a way of doing it and maintaining intellectual consistency. So, and this is one way that you know that there's a lot of lying going on and manipulation, emotional manipulation, is that they don't get down and define us very well. Because us, who are we? Americans, all right? That's anybody in North, South, Central America. That's an American. But no, around here, around these parts, Americans are U.S. citizens. Basically, it's sort of the last gasp of white supremacy. I know there are people that just get knee-jerk reactions when they hear phrases like that. And they just don't, it's like they kind of shut off. But it's unfortunate, but it must be said because that's what it is. And it's a large nebulous thing because it's never spelled out anywhere. There's no Mein Kampf out there that spells out who white people are and how they are supreme. And, a lot of that stuff just is handed down from previous generations where those things were articulated more clearly. Where there was once a whole science around the shape of your head, and you could see charts that showed the progression of evolution from ape to white men, with non-white men and or animals, down the progression towards bestiality. So it's like, it's more of those things. There was I forget which Supreme Court justice said it, but on the pornography debate, talking about, he made the comment, I can't explain what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. And white supremacy is a lot like that, in that the vast majority of people who believe in it, support it, defend it, I guess you might say, don't consciously think of themselves as being supporters or defenders or promoters of white supremacy, first of all. And second, couldn't really define what it is exactly anyway. They just know it when they see it. They know it when they feel it. So when they go out in public and look at groups of people, they know who we are and who they are. It's very simple for them. Although if you were to really pin them down and say, okay, how do you define this difference? They couldn't necessarily say it, or they wouldn't necessarily say it. They won't speak that part out loud. They won't say, well, that person's too dark, that person's, strange in this way or that way, or, they won't say that because they know they're not supposed to. But they know it when they see it. They know it when they feel it. They know it when they hear it. So there's a whole culture right now of people defending really violently, in many cases, a sort of what they consider normalcy. So people with alternative sexualities are not welcome there. People whose gender expression is unclear or different from how they might be perceived to be are not welcome here. People with different skin color, people with different religious backgrounds. There's a whole litany of things that don't fit into this notion of America, of what America is, of who we are as Americans. And so that's what Trump and his ilk play into, because they don't have to say it. They don't have to articulate it. They don't have to come out and define anything for anybody, because no one's expecting them to, and everybody that supports them already knows. So it's one of those things that the only people that would ask them to define it are people who are attacking them in some way. or people that call them out for expressions of it, oh, you're just attacking me. You're attacking my religion if you call me out for being a bigot and a homophobe. You're attacking my ethnicity if you call me out for being a racist. You're attacking my patriotism if you call me out for being xenophobic or whatever. So all of this is going on right now. And you have sort of one whole side, the more liberal end of the spectrum, who are like going, don't you see what you're doing? Can't you understand the effects of it? And you have this other group who's just like, no, you're just attacking us for all these things that I just mentioned. You don't understand us. You don't care about us. It's reverse racism. It's reverse this or reverse that. It's all built around this notion of, if you agree with me, then you're right. If you disagree with me, then there's something wrong with you. That kind of thing. So it's so frustrating to talk about this stuff because the people that I'm talking to generally, anyone who would watch this show and not like throw a brick through their TV set or, through their radio, already kind of understands this stuff. And at most, I am maybe offering ways of articulating it that you maybe didn't think of or that you wouldn't have said yourself. But you go, oh, well, that's a good way of saying this. Maybe that's the most that I'm able to offer you, or some information from the stories that I read that you're like, I hadn't heard about this or that thing yet. But the people that really need to hear this are not listening and won't listen because it challenges something beyond an opinion. They might say, well, you have your opinion and I have mine, but that's not what they're talking about. It's something more deeply believed that's like fundamental to their sense of right and wrong and reality. You run into this when you try to talk, for example, about religion with some people who are really religious. There are those who are comfortable enough in their beliefs that they'll entertain questions and they'll accept those beliefs being challenged because as far as they're concerned, it's good to think about these things. It's good to wonder about it and to question them. But the people that are shaky in their belief, they don't want to hear it. They will not listen to it. It's like, no. I cannot accept anything that challenges my worldview because if that's not right, then I have no idea what could be right. They're not wanting to accept yours. They want theirs because theirs is comfortable, it's familiar, it speaks to them in some way, and so there is no replacement for it, basically. If you take this away from me, I have nothing. And that is, unfortunately, where a lot of people are, and a lot of these people who have been co-opted by the current cult of Trump, which is really what it is. It's a cult. In many ways. And so it's very frustrating. Every time I do this show, I try to think of some new way to describe these things so that you can say, oh, I see what's going on. And then maybe some of that will trickle out to at least the more open-minded of those who have hitherto been somewhat seduced by the nativist, nationalist, racist, blah, 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 rhetoric of the Trump cult. But I don't have a lot of hope for that. I mean, my major push, if I can call it that, with this show is to humanize immigrants, is to like remind you that these are people. These, see, it's hard to even talk about it without some sort of, distancing going on. But immigrants are people who come from somewhere else. That's basically it. And they've come here for various reasons. There are good people, there are bad people, there's everything in between. They are mostly people who just really want a new start, basically. Wherever they were wasn't working for them. either in an extreme sense, like they were in danger and it was, risking their life, or even a milder sense of like, yeah, just not making enough money here. I'm not feeling as safe as I want to be, whatever that thing is. So it's like there's a whole spectrum. You cannot just lump immigrants into a single category, except in the fact that they can be called immigrants because they have traveled here from somewhere else and decided to stay. So that is the theme that underlies everything that I try to talk about. Today's show is pretty much going to be built around the notion that there's some kind of protectionist, some kind of fear and wanting to hide and turn away from anything that's different that underlies a lot of our immigration laws and a lot of the way even the legal system itself is kind of based around this notion that there's something wrong or dangerous or risky about people who aren't from here. As weird as it sounds when you put it that way, it's like, oh, people from here, okay, we can deal with them. People from there, I don't know. There's something about the whole system that is at least open to that sort of way of thinking. And, you can, it seems ridiculous when you put it like that, but I mean, honestly, it's like saying people from Indiana, I don't know. We really should be more careful about people from Indiana that we let come here into Illinois, because people from Illinois, corn, soybeans, we have a part of a Great Lake, whatever. I don't know. I don't know how, people define themselves as like who we are in such closed ways, but whatever it is, it's like that. It's like saying Iowa, you really don't want people from Iowa here. Indiana, some of them are okay, I guess. Missouri, I think we should build a wall between here and Missouri. Tennessee, whatever it is, it's just these notions of difference are based mostly on a lack of understanding, a lack of information. We don't know about the motives of the people from over there, so we worry about them. So it's just strange. So I should start reading because I'm wasting all this time talking about this stuff. But that's kind of the theme here is how that notion of otherness, of difference, and how otherness and difference leads to suspicion, and I'm not sure, they're just not like us, and in many cases to actual dehumanization. Because you're not like us, because you're not born here, you don't deserve the same respect, consideration, safety. None of those things. You don't deserve those because you're not from here. We should not give those to you. As if some magical thing at that borderline, suddenly people on that side of the border are less deserving of basic humanity than people on this side of the border. It sounds crazy, but it's literally what's going on. So let me start reading here. This first thing is entitled, Immigration Law Defies the American Constitution. So Americans generally take it for granted that the U.S. government cannot restrict freedom of speech. It cannot discriminate on the basis of ethnicity and religion. And it cannot detain people without due process. Though these rights are not absolute, there is at the very least a strong constitutional presumption against such measures. Much of this is thanks to the Bill of Rights and other constitutional protections particularly the 14th Amendment. But there is an area of public policy in which the government routinely gets away with oppression and discrimination that would be readily recognized as unconstitutional anywhere else, and that is immigration law. In Dred Scott versus Sanford, Chief Justice Roger Taney infamously wrote that black people, quote, had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, end quote. Many aspects of immigration policy are unfortunately based on a similar assumption. Immigrants have virtually no constitutional rights that the federal government is bound to respect. For example, last year in Trump versus Hawaii, the Supreme Court upheld President Donald Trump's travel ban policy, which barred most entry into the United States from several Muslim-majority nations. The court did so despite overwhelming evidence showing that the motivation behind the travel ban was a religious discrimination targeting Muslims, as Trump himself repeatedly stated. The supposed security rationale for the travel ban was extraordinarily weak, bordering on outright fraudulent. In almost any other context, the courts would have ruled against a policy so transparently motivated by religious bigotry and so lacking in any legitimate justification. It would have been considered an obvious violation of the First Amendment. In other situations, the Supreme Court has a much lower bar for what qualifies as unconstitutional discrimination on the basis of religion. Indeed, in Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, decided just a few weeks before the travel ban case, the Supreme Court overturned a decision from a state civil rights commission in a case regarding a baker who declined to prepare a cake for a same-sex wedding ceremony for religious reasons. Although the commission had originally concluded the baker had violated state anti-discrimination law, the court found that two of the group's 7 members had made biased statements against the baker's religion, meaning that his case hadn't been afforded the neutral treatment demanded by the First Amendment's free exercise clause, and invalidated the commission's decision. The court reached that decision, even though the commission would quite likely have ruled against the baker regardless of the prejudices of the 2 members. The other 5 commissioners also supported the ruling. All 5 of the justices who voted with the majority in the travel ban case were part of the 7-2 majority in Masterpiece Cake Shop. Why the difference between the 2 cases? As Chief Justice John Roberts explained in his majority opinion in the travel ban ruling, the answer is that the court defers to the government far more in immigration cases than practically any other area in which constitutional rights are at stake. As he put it, judicial inquiry into matters of entry and national security is highly constrained. The travel ban is far from the only case in which immigration restrictions have been held to a lower constitutional standard compared with almost any other exercise of government power. In August, the Israeli government was rightly criticized for barring entry of 2 American members of Congress because of their support for the anti-Israel boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, otherwise known as BDS. But few recalled that the U.S. also has a long history of banning foreigners with political views that the government disapproves of. Concerns that European immigrants had dangerous political views were a major motivation behind the highly restrictive 1924 Immigration Act.